Welcome, Tom, to the lecture on budgeting and break-even analysis. As we talk about this lecture, hopefully you've looked at the readings, and when we meet live next week, some of this we'll discuss even in more detail. Also, one of the things that I'd like you to begin doing, and I'll post it on Blackboard, is start thinking about what does your budget look like in terms of your current clinical program business plan. And we'll hit on some of those things you want to be thinking about and looking on for this. We're also going to talk about break-even analysis. And break-even analysis probably doesn't happen enough, or if at all, in a community pharmacy setting. And break-even analysis can have a lot of great tools. It can help in planning future inventory. It can help in adding new services. It could help in the evaluation of adding new staff. And it is a good tool also in analyzing contracts, especially if a contract is going to have a negative impact maybe initially, but what are you going to get for it in the long run? So let's begin. I've always used in the past in my traditional entrepreneur class a case that is several years old because the numbers may not reflect. But unfortunately, as we are entering into an era of poorer reimbursement, some of those numbers are actually coming back around. But in any type of community pharmacy business, you have to have a budget. And every year, even if you don't want to have a budget or not, you need to develop a pro forma, a P&L. And a P&L is a classic example of what does the current budget look like, even if you don't even have a budget. But whether you are budgeting, as the chapter 19 in the Pharmacy Essentials management book talks about, whether it is a full corporate budget for the business, whether it is a capital expense budget, whether it's a budget for a clinical program like the one you're trying to develop with a local doctor, there are certain contents that have to be in that. And the contents of it is, why are we doing this budget? What is the goal of this budget? What are the functions? And what are the responsibilities? Because budgeting allows us to plan. And any times we can become more proactive than reactive, we can handle the different stressors that can occur, especially in community pharmacy, where things can change suddenly based on current reimbursement models, exclusion from preferred networks, etc. And there's lots of advantages of budgeting. It can help, as I said, in terms of making employee decisions. It can help in adding new capital expenses, like a new software system, a new robotic technology. It can also help in the planning of inventory. So obviously, in any type of lecture, we have definitions. And the definition of a budget is it's a financial or quantitative statement prepared for the purpose of attaining a given objective. And that given objective allows us to more than forecast income and expenditures, but allows us to reflect on our current policies, future policies, and managerial decisions we may need to make. It is a way to evaluate our standard of performance. It is a way to compare actual results versus projected results. It is a way to do an analysis and determine what are things we can control, such as inventory sometimes, and staff. The functions of any type of budget is so that we can determine whether a new program we're adding, like your current program you want to add, is feasible and realistic. And also, a lot of times when we add a new program, is it sustainable? A budget helps us monitor financial activities. And the main function is to estimate the cost that's going to take to complete this objective and identify, are there any modifications we need to do to make this successful. There is always different types of budgets. There's short-term budgets, long-term budgets. Long-term budgets may play into a role of expansion of the business, capital expenses. There are different divisions of budget. What is our budget for income and revenue? What is our budget for expenses? Capital and equipment budget. So in the income or revenue accounts, the total income must be calculated for the proper implementation of a budget. So often reflecting on the prior years to help make forecasting and looking at a good market analysis also plays a role in helping determine the future budget, especially if we're looking to add new programs. Who would these programs impact? We may have to look at contracts, what people would be able to use our services. And so the determination of any type of budget that reflects income or revenue, there has to be ways to collect sales for daily, weekly, monthly, and annual, forecast of those sales, along with the costs that take to service those sales. There's other statistics that are valued to accurately predict the activity of a pharmacy department. And so there's numerous things that we have to analyze. What is the total number of prescriptions per day that we fill? What is the total hours of service that we fill these? If we're getting into a med synchronization program, which is a little bit different in determining more controlled average daily volume, what is the staffing required to be able to meet those needs? And if we go from a on-demand type of fill, where we meet staffing based on prescription volume per hour, we still need to look at prescription volume per hour in terms of a MedSync program. But the one thing is we may be able to stagger how our workforce is based upon when we fill those MedSync prescriptions on a weekly and monthly basis. We also have to constantly look at what's the per day average supply cost of a medication. I'll keep harping back to med synchronization because I think it's a key for survival in community pharmacy. The more we can control when we get our inventory to the time that we bill our inventory, the better we can have control on our accounts receivable and accounts payable. We also have to think about what does it cost to fill a prescription. That includes the salaries of the pharmacists and technicians. And so a good thing about budgeting and break-even analysis, it helps us determine at what point when our prescription volume goes up or it goes down, do we need to add staff or decrease staff hours or eliminate a position. The other thing is we have to think about expenditure accounts. All right, there are things such as administrative and general expenses, like pharmacy licenses, being able to pay maintenance fees on our software, having, professional care needs, our pharmacist licenses, and distribution expenses, in terms of, prescription labels, prescription bottles. We also, as I said, always have to account for salaries and wages, the purchasing of our products. And the other thing too is the purchasing of our products compared to the time that we actually are able to bill for that product and the time we get paid for that product and the time we have to pay our wholesaler so that we're not paying finance charges on our product. So all of those things have to be taken into account when we are determining a budget. When we look at expense accounts for salaries and wages, we have to think about permanent staff, part-time staff, temporary posts, and also if we are required, to pay overtime, and also what does it cost to cover vacation time, especially if that's part of a pharmacy benefit package. The responsible person should prepare a financial statement considering the requirement of the amount of supplies and materials with the latest available financial statement. And this can be for the daily, but it could be for other things, such as maybe you do yearly flu clinics and you have to forecast how much flu vaccine did I give last year? How much supplies did I need, such as needles, alcohol swabs, um, paper for screenings that did we use? And so keeping all those into account have a big impact because that will impact the bottom line, the net income from that type of service. And so just as you are trying to plan your budget for your business plan, what is the amount of time that it's going to take a pharmacist to help implement this? And what is the amount of time it's going to take staff? What are some expenditures we may need to use to be able to, make this successful? A lot of times in terms of budgets, we also have, purchase equipment expenses. Obviously, we always have drugs and pharmaceuticals, but we also have to think about equipment and construction budget. And so what might it cost to maybe purchase a new type of pill counter, such as an icon machine, and determine what is the benefit we're going to get out of that. Sometimes there may not be a true monetary, but what is the percentage of med errors you had last year? Might be a way to determine that. And what was the cost of possibly losing potential patients due to their distrust in the pharmacy due to med errors? Or what was the cost due to having additional staff because of fear of med errors? So sometimes technology may not have a direct bottom line to sales, but it also may have an impact on retention. And so it's necessary to always think about equipment and construction budgets of what are you going to get out of those in return for total sales. The implementation of a budget is always a difficult task and involves many different parameters. It may be the requirement of different departments to understand the purpose of the budget. What are we talking about that we can't get every request that we want? We may have to analyze the products. So for example, flu season is in our current process, but a good pharmacy owner or manager right now will be forecasting what does my current flu vaccine numbers look like because I got to pre-book my vaccines for next year. And then I have to look at what is going to be the reimbursement, at least from Medicare and maybe some of the providers I use, such as Highmark. And what is the reimbursement going to look like for next year? So when I determine the product I want to purchase, I can look at that and forecast that. The other thing is if we're implementing a budget where we might be adding new staff or changing the roles of new staff, all right, what is it going to take to actually fund that position? And a lot of times you have to think about other ancillary costs for that position. Is that person going to have to travel? Are you going to have to cover mileage? Is that person going to be full-time where you're going to have to offer time off? And how do you cover that person's time during that time? If you're adding a new service that you're going to have different types of fixed costs, such as a new computer, what does that encounter? So we need to look at the quantity of the products, the cost of the products, and what is this utility that we're adding to the budget going to bring to the business? There's lots of advantages of planning the budget. Once again, the better we plan, the better we can make decisions. We can have a clear focus on decision making to the management. And if we can effectively manage the finance of the pharmacy, it will help us during troubled times. It may also a budget expose reasons for over expenditure. So for example, right now the Pennsylvania Pharmacy Care Network has a new contract for a Gateway and Gateway Medicaid. Now Gateway Medicaid, it will pay me on average a fee for one comprehensive med review, and I can do monthly follow-ups, which is a lower fee. So one of the things I did in determining whether or not this, so we didn't, but the downside of this, let me backtrack, was I have to also purchase a different type of clinical software, and that clinical software is a yearly contract. So right off the bat, if I sign up for this contract for this certain one, I have to buy this clinical online software um, subscription. And so what I had to determine was I had to run how many potential patients do we actively have, and I ran back all the way to January 1st, and not every patient qualifies. And so I was able to, in our pharmacy system, run a report of who would qualify. And then I did a more um, conservative budget of if I got one comprehensive review and just 3 follow-ups, did I have a number of patients at least to break even to pay for the subscription of the software? And I ran that report among all 7 of my stores, and the only store that I only really had one store that was feasible enough because we just unfortunately don't have a lot of gateway patients to meet that need. So sometimes if I would have just said, yes, I believe in this, this is great, and I signed up every store, I might have exposed our business, which I have in the past, I'm not always perfect on these things, for over expenditure. Budgets also help to focus on what are your priorities, and that is part of the business planning. But budgeting is part of business planning and important. The other thing is budgeting allows me to look at what is my current staff I have and can they meet the needs to do what I need to do. And I might need to say, do I need to provide more training for my staff, or maybe do I have that key person is able to handle this new type of project? Obviously, when we talk about budgets, there are fixed costs and there are variable costs. So because of, variable costs, it sometimes is hard to plan. But a lot of times that is why when we do a P&L, we look at everything based on sales. So if we know we're going to increase sales by a certain amount, hopefully the next year based on our projections and planning, then we might be able to budget what our variable costs might be. And a classic example of variable cost is your inventory. So, your total cost of goods sold should be a reflection of, as you've heard before in other financial talks, of your total sales. So if anything that I project, it has to be able to, my budget has to be able to be in line with what I think my total sales are going to be, or it just doesn't work. So inventory control and budget planning. We'll talk about inventory when we meet in person in the very near future. But inventory control and budgeting planning go hand in hand. And one of the things we always have to look at there, it can be a scientific method of finding how much stock should be maintained in order to meet product demand. Because obviously we don't want to have a pharmacy where we're always out of stock. Now it does happen occasionally, but you need to think about, how often do I get, an order from my wholesaler? How quick do I turn things around? And having inventory in just a notebook in 2020 unfortunately just doesn't cut it. Using your pharmacy system to do perpetual inventory is a key thing in able to survive, and it's a key thing in any business you're doing. Think about the restaurant business, and we have product on our shelves that is also perishable, but at least it's got a 2-year dating. However, unfortunately, depending upon your wholesaler, you may not be able to return it for full credit, all right, within a certain period of time. So we do have an arrow. But think about a restaurant that has perishables that can go, rotten in days. They have to maintain a very good inventory budget. And the main purpose of having any type of inventory control in any business is to make sure we can supply the drug in time to the patient, because obviously we know drugs are life-sustaining. They save lives, especially when we talk about this time of year where we have antibiotics and antiretrovirals needed to fight severe infections. Obviously, too, if we do not have the product, the person may not come back, and we want to maximize customer service. But the other thing about having inventory control is any inventory, and you've heard this in the prior videos you watched, any inventory sitting on the shelf that is not being used is just untapped cash, all right, for that. And so we obviously want to avoid shortage of stock, but we definitely want to avoid wastage of stock. There's multiple different techniques for inventory control, and one of the easiest techniques is to estimate how much inventory is to be ordered. Also, it's useful for avoiding some expenditures which are not generally required. The ordering cost consists of stationery, stock quantity, storage, and receiving. And so, unfortunately, we don't always do this in the pharmacy. I'm sure there's a lot of pharmacies that never do this, but you could do a formula and analyze what was the demand for the year. And this probably is a good formula in when you're looking at vaccines like the flu vaccine, when you're looking at antibiotics different times a year, where those inventories can vary based upon the time of season on demand. Um, you also have to think about what does it cost to place a single order. Now, the one thing nice about our pharmacy systems is that, it's not hard. However, depending upon what wholesalers you use, especially if you use group purchasing organizations, they sometimes have a minimum. And so they may have a great savings on one product that might be great for you, but if you've got to add X amount of products to it just to make the minimum, then that might not be a good cost to place a single order. And the other thing is the cost to hold one unit of inventory for a year. And so, as I said, we always look at the number of turns we have on our shelves. And so everybody uses different formulas. I've always been taught that at least to have, a 72-hour supply for most products. Some go a little bit narrow and go 48 hours. It all depends upon your hours of operation and what your hours are on a weekend. Um, Another is the VED analysis. This analysis is based on the utility material in the drugstore. It's useful in controlling and maintaining the stock of various types of formulations, and it falls into different classes. You have vital stock, which you can think about as your, things that we should always be carrying, like antibiotics. Essential stock, your fast movers, and your desirable stock, things that people do use that's in the top 200 drugs dispensed in a community pharmacy but may not be high demand. And one of the things in doing this analysis, we look at what should be our min and maxes in our reorder points. So to maintain inventory control, you have various levels. What's the maximum at any time do I want to carry of this product? What is the minimum of this product do I want to carry? And what is the reorder? I heard a talk about a year or two ago at our pharmacy software conference, and I heard a gentleman, and what he does, which I think is interesting, is that brand products do not usually give a price break at large quantities. Generics, they do. So you might find that it is more beneficial to buy a bottle of 1,000 of a fast mover versus a bottle of 100. But his philosophy in the brand products is he carries the minimum size. And he said, if you look, a lot of those minimum sizes are based upon the quantity dispensed per prescription for a month's supply. And his philosophy of this is that brand products can fluctuate in popularity based upon the formularies, based upon the clinical data out there. And he would rather not have to have an open bottle, which is non-returnable, for getting um, full credit for. And I think it kind of holds into logic. One of the things we've done too to help with inventory control, we've done it at my family's pharmacy, and we've done it at one of our stores, and I'm going to try to implement it at all our stores, is we try to put all the brand products in one bay. And the reason why is if you think about 20% of your most expensive in your pharmacy comes from those brand products. And even if you don't have a sophisticated system yet for doing mins and maxes and analyzing that, is this will allow you to at least review the shelves per week and look at the date of the sticker. That's why I think it's important to sticker the bottles in the pharmacy so that you can see when did I order that last. But when you look at the various levels, you want to look at, your max level should be, your max level is what is your reorder level, plus the reorder quantity, plus the minimum consumption. And, you're always going to be looking at things such as the nature of the material. Does it have short dating? What's the market trend going on? What's the storage space available? And what are your fashion habits? Modern computerization can really help with inventory control. And all these days, all the purchase and inventory controls are made by computer applications. Your pharmacy itself can your pharmacy systems themselves sometimes are sophisticated enough that they can do what's called, inventory wizards to look at your trends and give you recommendations. There's companies out there that will actually interface with your pharmacy systems. We currently use at Klingesmith a company called Data Rhythm, and what Data Rhythm does, it basically massages our reorder points based upon our volume. We also, because we do have multiple stores, we can actually run a report of what is dead, inventory, and then see where it could go. But if you're a one-store operation, your pharmacy system should be able to do that. Can you run a report of, what products that are on your shelf that you haven't used in the last 90 days? And modernization, computerization can really help in inventory budgeting because it can give you some very fast results. It can help you, minimize your investment of what's sitting on the shelves and be able to help you in forecasting. Most people on average say when they go to computerized inventory control, they can at least get $20,000 to $25,000 off their shelves immediately, because that variable cost outside of staff wages is the most costly thing right now in a community pharmacy. So being able to control those variable costs can have a big impact on your gross margin, and your gross margin is what helps pay for your fixed operating costs. And those expenses in a budget we're always looking at. We're looking at employee wages. What are fair wages? This NCPA data I have here, I needed to update. This is a little bit old. If you listen to the Olin Sykes videos, he talks about that our employee wages should actually be about 10.5 to 11% of our sales, which is a little tough and difficult. We should always be looking at what our rent is if we have rent. Always reevaluating our utilities. Are we getting the best bang for our buck from our cable providers for internet, or whatever we use for our fast internet? What are we using for our phone systems? These should always be reevaluated, because just like a home budget, getting help from those little places can help the bottom line so importantly for that. The final thing in this lecture I want to talk about is break-even analysis. Obviously, in break-even analysis, and this comes from chapter 8 of the PDF from the Financial for Pharmacists that I posted, break-even analysis, and although this book's a little bit dated, the data is a little bit old, it still plays a big role, because you want to find out is at least what is it going to take to get to break even with my costs versus my sales. And the purpose of break-even analysis is to find out when the total revenues equals total cost. So obviously nobody's gone into business and nobody can grow their business if they stay at break-even. But obviously when you are first starting a pharmacy or you're starting a new program, you want to be able to forecast when are you going to hit that break-even point. And so the purpose of break-even analysis is to be able to look at that. And in break-even analysis, I provided the NCPA break-even calculator for you. You can put in the total prescriptions drugs you dispense per year, your total revenue. You can put in your rent, and you can actually find out what your average prescription drug cost is and what your variable cost is, and what is it going to take to be able to break even. What does your cost need to be? And so this is a great budget tool to help any pharmacy in doing that. I think also break-even analysis can help analyzing on single products or single clinical service programs. So for example, you can use break-even analysis to analyze vaccination programs. You can use break-even analysis to analyze clinical programs. And so one of the things obviously in any break-even analysis is what's the average price for a prescription if we're looking at prescription products. So what's the average price you're getting reimbursed maybe for flu vaccinations? What is the average you're going to charge for an MTM type of clinical service or point of care testing? And you're going to take that and look at what is your total revenue, which is your RX volume times your average prescription price. And so this is where you would get, the total sales depending upon the time period for that. So if you fill 5,000 prescriptions per month and you average price is $22.24, hopefully it's a lot higher than that. Like I said, this chapter is a little bit old. Your total sales, prescription sales for that month would be $111,000. When you're analyzing on a multiple product, you're going to look at the contribution margin. And what is the contribution margin? The contribution margin is a percent of sales used to calculate the pharmacy's break-even point. The contribution margin is calculated in this example. And so if you take your revenue minus your variable costs, which a lot of times in a pharmacy is your cost of goods sold, there is your contribution margin. And then as I was showing you in that P&L earlier, you take your operating expenses, which is usually your fixed cost. You then have your net income. And your contribution margin is, like I said, you take your percent of sales used to calculate that break-even point. And so, for example, if the revenue of this pharmacy was $892,000, the variable cost was $643,000, the contribution margin was $248,700, minus the fixed costs, you get the net income of $41,400. And so, like I said, if you take the variable costs, and if you subtract the percentage of sales minus the percentage of variable costs to sales, you'll get your contribution margin, where in this case it's 0.279. Break-even analysis is nice, but as I said earlier, nobody goes into business or is going to be the manager of a business if all you do is break even. You want to see additional growth. And so one of the things is whatever new service we add or whatever additional growth we add or whatever additional staff we add, are we going to at least be at the stay even point? And what I mean by the stay even point, are we going to at least be at the same profitability we were if we didn't? This is a great tool you can think about when you're looking at pharmacy contracts. So if I add this contract, will the amount of volume I get from this contract keep me still at the same profitability stay even point? And if it doesn't, what is my actually gaining from that? And granted, nothing's perfect. There's other things you may sell in the front of the store that calculates into that, but at least this is getting it and starting it from a scientific perspective. So if you look at the stay even point, you're taking your fixed cost plus your net income divided by your contribution margin. And so, for example, to be able to be at stay even point, we need $891,398 in sales. And for that to occur, we need an additional 36,102 prescriptions to stay at break-even point. You can use these tools in a practical way when you're looking at managerial decisions. So, for example, your program you want to do with a doctor, say you're going to increase your advertising budget for your program. You're going to increase it by $500 per month. Well, your sales volume before was $892,000. Your contribution margin percentage was 0.279. Your fixed cost was $207,000 and your net income was $41,400. So if you use this formula, all right, if you take that, you're going to add $500 per month, you're going to increase your fixed cost by $6,000. And so, what do you need in terms of sales to be able to do that? And so, your sales for that to occur has to go to $912,000. So, we need an additional, we need an additional little bit less than $100,000 in sales just to be able to, stay even point. And so these formulas can be a very good tool to help you in terms of forecasting. So as I said, for this calculation, you would need to have your sales increase. I said less than 100,000, but it really was only about 20,000. If sales increase was less than 20,000, then obviously our profits would decrease. And that is a way to also analyze whether a program is worth to continue or not. So you always want to get, just like in clinical, you get the baseline labs, you get the baseline financials, you add your program and you do that evaluation. Also, you can use this to analyze increase in prescription volume to cover advertising. So an example, if we increase our prescription advertising by $250 per month, that's $300 per year. If our current RX volume is 36,100 per, RX, our contribution margin then would be $5.18. Our fixed cost is $185,000 and our income would be $2,000. So for us to be able to add that additional advertising, we hope that advertising for us to at least stay even, we would need to increase prescriptions by 598,000. Not 598, 598, I'm sorry. But if you think about that, you could use this type of formula to look at whether or not you want to start a new adherence program, whether you want to start, working with like a mental health group, and you use your advertising, or maybe you hire a sales marketer to go out to do this, and you want to determine that you're going to pay this sales marketer, a base salary, but you'll give them maybe a bonus based upon how much volume. So obviously for them to get any type of bonus, you would need to, in this case scenario, exceed more than 598 prescriptions per year for them to meet their bonus. Another could be in discounts. And this is an example of an OTC discount, but think about when you're signing a new third-party contract. Third-party contracts, especially ones that are on preferred networks, a lot of times you're taking a bigger hit. So you need to analyze, what do I need additionally in sales to be able to stay even? But this is a simple example using of OTC discount. So for example, if I want to do a 10% discount on my OTCs, and 25% of total sales is OTCs. So that means that 2.5% of all sales are going to be discounted. So if I take that 2.5%, all right, times 869,000. So what would my SEP be? So if I look at, what my contribution margin is in this scenario, is 0.260. All right, and I look at what my OTC sales are, how much additional sales will I need to stay even. I'm going to need 956,538 compared to the 869. So we talked about budgeting, we talked about break even. These two chapters I provide more detail and examples in just my overview lecture, but I think the purpose of both in combination is a way to forecast, especially when you're adding new programs, analyzing new programs, or also just starting to get better control of your inventory. So what I'd like you to do, and I will have it typed up in a Word document just with the statements, I'd like you to be able to create a budget to submit to me in 2 weeks of your business plan. Okay? If you have any questions, we can talk about when we meet live. And I thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you. Take care.